Imagine discovering that one of the things you do every single week in your kitchen, something you consider practical, economical, and responsible because it helps you avoid wasting food, may actually be quietly creating conditions that contribute to one of the deadliest forms of cancer in the human body. Does that sound exaggerated? Unfortunately, it does not. There is a routine habit repeated by hundreds of millions of people without the slightest concern. Reheating leftovers. And the reality of what happens inside four particular foods when they are exposed to heat for the second time is something most people will never hear about in their entire lives. In the next few minutes, I will explain exactly which four foods are considered the most dangerous to reheat, what they transform into chemically inside your body after being heated again, and why those transformations are connected to one of the cancers with the lowest survival rates in modern medicine, pancreatic cancer. My name is Judy Hartwell, and today I want to share information that I believe every person who cooks at home deserves to know. Because I have spoken with far too many patients who, after receiving a devastating diagnosis, looked at me and asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me this earlier?" And I no longer want to stay silent. Before we continue, there is one thing you need to understand. The pancreas rarely gives warnings. When it is being damaged, you do not feel pain. It does not swell. It does not send signals while damage slowly builds over years and decades due to repeated chemical exposure. By the time someone notices the first symptoms of pancreatic cancer, back pain, jaundice, unexplained weight loss, the disease has usually been developing for years, and the 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer remains around 12%, only 12%. This is not the type of illness that gives people many second chances after symptoms appear. In this case, prevention is not simply the best option. It is the only strategy that consistently makes a difference. And part of that prevention may currently be sitting inside your refrigerator waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's meal. But before I explain the four foods, it is important to understand what actually happens chemically when food is reheated. Without that explanation, everything may sound like unnecessary fear rather than real biochemistry. When food is cooked for the first time, natural chemical reactions begin to occur. Proteins interact with sugars and heat. Nitrogen-containing compounds react with amino acids. Fats begin to oxidize. In most situations, the compounds created during the initial cooking process exist in amounts that the body can still manage, process, and eliminate. But reheating changes the situation entirely. When food is exposed to heat again, several things happen simultaneously. First, antioxidant compounds originally present in the food become further weakened or destroyed. The natural biological defenses that could partially neutralize harmful substances disappear. Second, the chemical reactions that produced small amounts of carcinogens during the first cooking process begin again, but now without those protective buffers. Third, bacterial activity that developed while the food cooled and was stored has already started transforming certain substances, especially nitrates in vegetables, into more reactive and dangerous forms. Heat then pushes those intermediate compounds further into carcinogens. The compounds that concern cancer researchers the most are N-nitroso compounds, also known as nitrosamines, as well as heterocyclic amines. Both have been classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as probable human carcinogens. Animal studies have shown strong evidence that N-nitroso compounds can contribute to cancer development in multiple organs, including the pancreas. Scientific papers published in peer-reviewed journals suggest that dietary nitroso compounds represent one pathway through which long-term exposure may increase pancreatic cancer risk. This is not speculation or theory. These findings exist within scientific literature, and they directly relate to the foods I am about to discuss. Food number 1, processed meat, especially reheated processed meat. Most people believe they already understand the dangers of processed meat, but in reality, many do not fully understand the chemistry involved. Hot dogs, bacon, sausages, ham, deli meats, canned meats, smoked meats, any product preserved, cured, smoked, or treated with nitrates and nitrites. These foods already contain measurable amounts of N-nitroso compounds before they even reach your kitchen. The nitrites used as preservatives react with naturally occurring amines in meat proteins, creating nitrosamines long before preparation. When you reheat these foods, you are not starting from a neutral state. You are applying heat to a product that already contains documented carcinogenic compounds, and high temperatures accelerate the formation of additional nitrosamines. The higher the temperature and the longer the exposure, the stronger the chemical reaction becomes. Frying or microwaving processed meat at high heat significantly increases nitrosamine concentration compared to its original state. Research examining the connection between dietary N-nitroso compounds and pancreatic cancer has shown that higher intake levels are associated with increased risk. Studies investigating red and processed meat consumption describe several possible mechanisms behind this relationship, including heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and N-nitroso compounds generated during high-temperature cooking, all considered important mutagens. The practical conclusion is simple. Processed meats already contain carcinogenic precursors. Cooking them once is already a substantial chemical process. Reheating them at high temperatures only intensifies a reaction that should never have been encouraged to begin with. If you choose to eat these foods, and I am not telling you to eliminate them completely, eat them freshly prepared. Avoid reheating them repeatedly in a microwave at maximum heat. Food number 2, spinach and other nitrate-rich leafy vegetables. This point surprises many people the most. They choose spinach precisely because they believe it is healthy. They add it to meals because nutritional advice has praised it for decades, and that advice is not wrong. Spinach truly contains iron, folate, vitamins, and antioxidants. But then people reheat leftover spinach from the previous evening and unknowingly reduce much of its nutritional benefit while simultaneously triggering chemical pathways they were trying to avoid. Here is what happens. Spinach naturally contains nitrates, compounds considered safe and even beneficial in fresh vegetables because they may support blood pressure and cardiovascular health. However, after cooking and storage, even inside a refrigerator, bacteria and enzymes within the vegetable begin gradually converting nitrates into nitrites. This process continues throughout storage. The longer cooked spinach sits, the more nitrites it contains. When spinach is reheated, two things happen simultaneously. Heat accelerates additional nitrite formation, and it also drives reactions between nitrites and amino acids present in the vegetable, producing nitrosamines. A study published in the journal Food specifically warned against leaving boiled spinach at room temperature for extended periods because of this nitrate to nitrosamine conversion pathway. The same principle applies to other nitrate-rich vegetables such as celery, beetroot, kale, and carrots. Celery, in particular, contains extremely high nitrate levels. When celery is cooked into soups or stews and then reheated multiple times, something common in home kitchens, every reheating cycle pushes nitrate conversion even further toward nitrosamine formation. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer has confirmed that nitrosamines found in food are established carcinogens associated with gastrointestinal and pancreatic cancers. The irony is obvious. The vegetable you are reheating because you believe it is healthy gradually transforms into something working against the very protection it was supposed to provide. The safest approach is straightforward. Prepare spinach and leafy greens in portions that will be eaten immediately. If spinach remains afterward, consume it cold the next day, for example, in a salad, instead of reheating it. Cold storage does not drive nitrosamine formation. Heat does. If you have continued reading this far, the topic clearly matters to you. You want to know what comes next. But many people read information like this and move on without saving it, only to miss important discussions later. Now let us continue, because the third food is one many people already suspect may be harmful, although usually for completely different reasons. Food number 3, cooking oils, especially oils that are heated repeatedly. Most people vaguely understand that reusing oil is not ideal, but very few understand the exact chemistry involved and how it relates to cancer risk. When vegetable oils rich in polyunsaturated fats, such as sunflower, corn, soybean, or canola oil, are heated to cooking temperatures, a process called lipid peroxidation begins. The double bonds inside polyunsaturated fatty acids react with oxygen and heat, producing chains of oxidized compounds. Aldehydes, including acrolein and 4-hydroxynonenal, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide when starchy foods are involved. These substances are genotoxic, meaning they can directly damage DNA. When the oil is heated again, or when foods prepared in that oil are reheated later, oxidation continues from where it previously stopped. Every additional heating cycle increases the damage. The smoke point of oil decreases after every use, meaning it breaks down and releases toxic substances faster and at lower temperatures each time it is reheated. Aldehyde and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon concentrations continue rising with repeated heating. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies several compounds generated during repeated oil heating, including acrylamide and certain PAHs, as probable carcinogens. Research studying heterocyclic amines, PAHs, and acrylamide in cooked foods shows that cooking temperature and duration are major factors determining how much of these harmful substances are created. Every time you reheat fried foods, French fries, fried chicken, or anything prepared in deep oil, you are exposing the food once again to compounds formed during previous oxidation cycles. An additional concern with reheating fried food is uneven temperature distribution, especially inside microwaves. Certain areas become excessively hot and scorched while others barely warm up. Those overheated areas generate the highest concentrations of heterocyclic amines, PAHs, and acrylamide. And you may not even notice it because microscopic burning does not always produce visible darkening. The safer approach is not to reheat fried food at all. If you eat fried food, consume it fresh immediately after cooking. If reheating becomes necessary, use an oven at moderate heat so the food warms evenly, and never reuse cooking oil after frying. Food number 4, rice. And unlike the previous examples, the danger here is not mainly related to direct carcinogenic chemistry. The concern with reheated rice involves bacterial toxins that resist heat and have been linked to chronic intestinal inflammation, itself considered an important risk factor for gastrointestinal cancers. When cooked rice is left at room temperature, something studies show happens frequently in households preparing large batches, a bacterium called Bacillus cereus begins multiplying. Its spores survive the original boiling process and remain dormant inside the grains. This bacterium produces 2 types of toxins. One causes vomiting within hours. The other leads to diarrhea and forms primarily during storage rather than reheating. The critical detail most people never hear is this: reheating rice may destroy the bacteria, but it does not eliminate the toxins already produced. Those toxins are heat resistant. They survive microwaving. They survive stovetop reheating. The bacteria may disappear, but the toxins remain. In the short term, they can trigger nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Unpleasant, but usually temporary. Over long periods, however, repeated exposure to these toxins may contribute to chronic intestinal inflammation. Chronic inflammation within the digestive tract is one of the most well-established pathways associated with gastrointestinal cancers. Every time intestinal tissue becomes irritated by heat-resistant toxins, microscopic damage occurs. Over years and decades of repeated exposure, those small injuries may gradually create an environment favorable for cancer development. This connection is not hypothetical. The relationship between chronic intestinal inflammation and gastrointestinal cancers has been repeatedly demonstrated in scientific research. The proper protocol for rice is simple. After cooking, cool rice quickly, ideally within 1 hour, and refrigerate it immediately. Rapid cooling prevents the rice from remaining in the bacterial growth temperature range long enough for significant toxin production. Refrigerated rice should be stored no longer than 24 hours. It should only be reheated once, and it must become fully steaming hot throughout, not merely warm in the center. Never reheat rice a second time. It is better to prepare smaller portions so large amounts of leftovers do not accumulate. If you routinely cook large quantities of rice to save time, reconsider that habit. The time saved is not worth decades of repeated exposure to bacterial toxins. Let us bring everything together so you leave with clarity rather than fear. 4 foods, 4 different mechanisms. One common principle: reheated processed meats generate nitrosamines, N-nitroso compounds linked by research to pancreatic cancer and classified as probable carcinogens by international cancer organizations. Reheated spinach and nitrate-rich vegetables convert natural nitrates into nitrites and then into nitrosamines through heat-driven chemical reactions that could be avoided simply by consuming them cold or preparing them fresh. Reheated oils and fried foods create accumulating levels of aldehydes, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and acrylamide, genotoxic compounds capable of damaging DNA directly, with each heating cycle intensifying the previous damage. An improperly stored reheated rice may contain heat-resistant bacterial toxins that survive microwaving and contribute to chronic intestinal inflammation over years of repeated exposure. None of this requires completely changing your entire diet. No one is saying you must stop enjoying food. It only requires 4 practical habit changes. Avoid reheating processed meats at very high temperatures. Eat cooked spinach and leafy greens cold the following day instead of reheating them. Discard used frying oil and avoid reheating fried foods. Cool rice rapidly. Refrigerate it promptly and reheat it only once until steaming hot. That is the practical summary. These 4 habits, practiced consistently, may significantly reduce exposure to the types of compounds researchers and oncologists associate with some of the deadliest cancers. Now think about this for a moment. Which of these 4 foods surprised you the most? The answer often reveals where the largest gaps in public health education still exist, and that understanding shapes future conversations about nutrition and health. If this information genuinely changes how you think about cooking this week, share it. Not for an audience, but for someone in your life who reheats leftover sausages every morning without ever considering the chemistry involved. That small action may become one of the most valuable things you do for another person's health today. The next discussion will focus on 5 breakfast foods heavily marketed as healthy, despite growing research suggesting the opposite, especially for adults over 60. And finally, one important clarification. Everything discussed here is based on published research in biochemistry, food science, and international cancer research organizations. This information is educational and should not replace personal medical advice. The relationship between dietary carcinogens and cancer risk is well established in scientific literature, but cancer is complex, and individual risk depends on many factors specific to each person. If you have concerns regarding diet or cancer risk, speak with your physician who understands your medical history. My name is Judy Hartwell. Protect your health using the knowledge your kitchen never came with. I will see you in the next discussion.